A powerful CEO discovers a weary soldier sleeping outside her building and, moved by something she can't yet name, brings him inside. As the morning unfolds, she learns he's a disciplined veteran navigating hardship, mistrust, and a past incident that left his life unraveling. Her staff watches in shock as she postpones meetings, shields him from judgment, and guides him toward warmth, dignity, and honest conversation. While helping him, buried memories from her own past surface, revealing why his presence affects her so deeply. Their unexpected connection sets the stage for a profound transformation neither of them sees coming. She noticed him before the sun did, just a still shape curled beneath the sharp glow of the security lights, a silhouette that didn't belong to the clean lines and polished glass of the building. At first, Jacqueline Hale thought the figure was a pile of discarded blankets someone had left on the marble steps. But then the wind shifted, carrying the faint metallic scent of sweat and cold steel, and she saw the boots. Military boots. Worn, cracked, and dusted with a silence that felt older than dawn. That was when something inside her, something she usually kept pinned tightly beneath meetings, deadlines, and power, stirred like a warning bell. And Jacqueline, the CEO who never paused for anything, stopped walking. The city was still half asleep, draped in a bluish haze that glossed over its concrete edges. Her driver waited by the curb, watching her through the mirror, confused as she stepped closer to the sleeping figure. Jacqueline didn't usually approach strangers. She didn't usually walk anywhere without purpose. But something about the way the soldier's shoulders rose and fell, slow, deliberate, controlled even in sleep, pulled her in with a gravitational force she couldn't explain. She stood there for a long moment, the chilled morning wrapped around her like a hesitant hand, unsure of whether to wake him or let him rest. The soldier's breath clouded in the air, mist curling upward like a silent prayer. His uniform was mismatched, camouflage pants, a black thermal shirt, and a jacket that looked far too thin for the biting autumn cold. His backpack sat beside him, tightly packed, the straps frayed but neatly tied. Everything about him suggested discipline, but everything around him suggested collapse. Jacqueline felt her heartbeat gather in her throat, not out of fear but something heavier, something she rarely allowed, concern. It wasn't unusual for people to sleep on the streets in this part of the city. What was unusual was her reaction to it. Jacqueline had built her life on clarity, on making decisions quickly and never allowing emotion to be the reason. She was the kind of woman who saw problems only as puzzles waiting for solutions, not as stories with tangled roots. But now, as she stood in front of the sleeping soldier, she found herself wondering not about next steps or PR implications, but about who he was, and why he had chosen her staircase, her building, of all places, to rest his head. A gust of wind swept through the plaza, disturbing the edges of his jacket. Instinct pushed her forward. She lowered herself slowly, careful not to startle him, and the cold marble seeped through her heels as she crouched. The soldier's face was unexpectedly young. His jaw sharp but unshaven. His brow furrowed even in sleep, as if he were dreaming of unfinished battles. There were faint scars, one beneath his eye, another across his temple, stories etched into skin that had clearly weathered more than city wind. "Ma'am," her driver whispered from behind. "Should I call security?" Jacqueline didn't answer right away. Her gaze stayed locked on the soldier. "No," she finally murmured. "Not yet." Her voice must have stirred the morning, because the soldier shifted, a small, slow movement, like a man surfacing from deep water. His eyelids fluttered open. For a heartbeat, he didn't react to seeing her, as if waking up to a CEO crouched in front of him was no stranger than waking up under an open sky. But then awareness flashed through his eyes, sharp and trained. He jolted upright, posture snapping into a rigid line, gaze darting around for danger he could not name. "Sorry, ma'am," he said, voice hoarse, scraping like gravel. "I didn't mean to trespass. I'll go. I'm sorry." He reached for his backpack with trembling fingers. Not fear. Cold. Exhaustion. Too many nights like this one. Jacqueline raised a hand, an unusual gesture, soft instead of commanding. "You don't have to leave right this second," she said quietly. "Are you all right?" The soldier hesitated. His eyes studied her with a caution that came not from distrust, but from a lifetime of only being noticed when there was trouble. "Yes, ma'am. I'm fine. Just needed a place to rest." "You were freezing," she said. "How long have you been out here?" He lowered his gaze. "A while." It wasn't an answer, but it carried truth in its weight. Jacqueline could feel the city waking around them, cars humming, lights flickering on, footsteps growing louder. Her staff would arrive soon. Her day was supposed to begin with a board meeting, then negotiations, then a site visit. But standing here, looking at this soldier who had folded himself into the cold as if he deserved nothing better, she felt the day shift, rearranging itself around a question she wasn't ready to ignore. "What's your name?" she asked. He hesitated again, then spoke with the stiff clarity of someone reciting something drilled into muscle memory. "Private First Class Evan Morrow." "Evan," she repeated, letting his name settle in the space between them. "Are you hungry?" He blinked, startled by the simplicity of the question. "Ma'am, I don't want to cause trouble." "It's not trouble. It's breakfast." She stood, smoothing her coat, her breath steady in the chilled air. "Come inside. Warm up." He looked at the building as if it were a fortress rather than a corporate headquarters. "I'm not presentable." "You're human," she said. "That's presentable enough." The soldier didn't move at first. The invitation hung between them like fragile glass, and Jacqueline sensed he was weighing something far heavier than pride. Finally, with the slow, deliberate movement of someone stepping into unfamiliar territory, Evan rose to his feet. His legs wobbled, and he caught himself on the railing. Jacqueline stepped forward instinctively, but he shook his head, steadying on his own. "Thank you, ma'am," he murmured. As they walked toward the doors, Jacqueline felt a strange pressure build behind her ribs, an intuition she couldn't name. Something told her this moment was not a small one. Not a morning inconvenience. Not a random encounter. It felt like the beginning of a story she had unknowingly stepped into, one that would test the walls she'd spent years constructing around her life. And somewhere behind those walls, a quiet truth whispered, "Nothing that happens next will be simple." The lobby lights cast a warm amber glow across the polished floors, a stark contrast to the cold marble steps Evan had slept on. As Jacqueline led him inside, every footstep he took sounded too loud, too foreign, as though he were intruding on a world he had long ago stopped believing he belonged to. He kept his shoulders tight, posture straight, eyes scanning the room with quiet discipline. Old instincts. Ones that didn't fade just because the uniform got worn and the nights grew long. A receptionist noticed them first. Her expression flickered, recognition of her CEO followed by confusion at the man trailing behind her. Jacqueline ignored the look. She walked with the same calm authority she used in boardrooms, but inside, something restless nudged at her. Each glance from her staff felt like a spotlight on Evan's fatigue, his patched clothes, the way he hugged his backpack as if it held the last pieces of a life he was scared to lose. "Conference room C," Jacqueline said to the receptionist. "Have someone bring coffee, tea, and whatever hot breakfast the kitchen can manage quickly." "Of course, Ms. Hale," the woman replied, masking her curiosity with professional smoothness. Jacqueline pushed open the frosted glass door to the smaller conference room. Morning light filtered through the high windows, dust motes drifting like quiet confessions in the air. Evan paused at the threshold, his hand hovering over the strap of his backpack. "You can sit," she said gently. He chose the chair nearest the door. Not the comfortable one near the window. Not the one opposite her. The one that allowed him a clear exit. Jacqueline took the seat across from him, watching as he tried to shrink into himself, making his broad frame small, discreet, unnoticeable. Up close, she saw it again, that strange combination of discipline and unraveling, like a soldier half-assembled. His eyes carried the rawness of someone who had spent too many nights in places not meant for living and too many days pretending he wasn't disappearing inside them. "Evan, how long have you been out of the service?" she asked. He rubbed his palms against his thighs before answering. 6 months. And in the city? A few weeks. Sleeping outside my building. That wasn't your plan, was it? He shook his head, jaw shifting. "No plan, ma'am. Just days." There was something haunting in that phrase. Just days. As if life had stopped being a story and had become a series of sunrises he wasn't sure he'd earned. Before she could ask more, the door opened and a staff member entered, balancing trays of food. Evan straightened instantly, hands clasped in his lap. The man set the trays down, eyes flicking between them, and left with a stiffness that betrayed his confusion. Jacqueline slid a plate toward Evan. "Pancakes. Eggs. Something warm, something grounding. "Eat," she said. He hesitated for only a second, then picked up the fork. Hunger won. He ate carefully at first, as though afraid of appearing desperate, but the tremor in his hands betrayed the truth. Halfway through the eggs he paused, swallowed, and whispered, "Thank you." Jacqueline didn't answer immediately. She'd sat across from negotiators, politicians, even billionaires, and none had spoken those two words with such unarmored sincerity. It struck her more deeply than she expected. "What brought you here?" she asked softly. His fork stilled. His shoulders tensed again. The air thickened with things he didn't know how to say. "I didn't know where else to go," he finally murmured. "The shelters were full. I thought your steps looked safe. I wasn't planning anything. Just needed rest." Rest, said with the reverence of someone who hadn't truly felt it in a long time. "What about family?" she asked. A shadow crossed his face. "No one left who can help. And the VA services. Support." A humorless breath escaped him. Not a laugh, too hollow. "I'm on the list. But lists don't keep the nights warm, ma'am." She felt the sting of his words. Not because they were sharp, but because they were true. Silence settled between them, not uncomfortable, just heavy. Jacqueline leaned back, studying him the way she studied complex problems, but this wasn't a business puzzle. This was a human one. A living one. And she didn't know the rules. "What did you do in the service?" she asked. He straightened unconsciously. "Army Infantry, 10th Mountain Division. 2 deployments. Last one, longer than planned." There was more there. She could hear it, the fracture lines beneath the simple summary. But she didn't press. The room felt too fragile for interrogation. "Evan," she said, "do you have a plan for today? Anywhere to go after breakfast?" His lips parted, but no words came. The truth was in the silence. "All right," she said, making the decision before she could overthink it. "I'm not sending you back outside." His head jerked slightly, surprise flickering across his face. "Ma'am, that's... I can't ask you for..." "You didn't ask," she said. "I noticed." His eyes dropped, and something flickered. Shame, gratitude, confusion, all tangled together. A knock interrupted them. Her assistant stepped inside, tablet in hand. "Jacqueline, the board is waiting. They're asking if you'll be up in the next 10 minutes. Of course they were. Jacqueline Hale was never late. She was the immovable pillar of her own empire. But her gaze drifted to Evan, and something shifted inside her again, the sense that her schedule wasn't the only thing at stake this morning. "Reschedule," she said. Her assistant blinked. "Reschedule? The board meeting?" "Yes." Her tone left no room for debate. When the door closed again, Evan stared at her as though she'd just rewritten the laws of gravity. "You didn't need to do that for me." Jacqueline exhaled slowly. "Maybe I needed to do it for myself." He frowned slightly, trying to make sense of her meaning, but she didn't elaborate. She wasn't sure she could. Instead, she folded her hands on the table. "Here's what we're going to do. You're going to finish eating. Then I'm going to find you a place to warm up and rest properly. And after that, we'll figure out the next steps." "Why?" he whispered, the word escaping before he could swallow it. She met his gaze, steady and unblinking. "Because you remind me of someone I owe more than an apology to." The truth of that startled even her. A memory rose, unwelcome, sharp, but she pushed it aside. "Not now." Evan stared at her, searching for something in her eyes. Maybe a catch. Maybe judgment. But there was none. Just a quiet resolve he didn't understand. Outside the conference room, whispers had begun to ripple through the office. Her staff had noticed. Questions would follow. Speculation. Judgment. But Jacqueline no longer felt the weight of it. Something more important was unfolding here. Something she didn't yet have a name for. And though neither of them knew it, this decision, the moment she chose to see him, was about to ripple far beyond breakfast, far beyond the lobby, far beyond anything Jacqueline Hale had ever planned for. Because sometimes the stories that change everything begin not with power or intention, but with a single act of noticing. The executive suite on the 28th floor was quiet at this hour, the city still shaking off its morning haze. Jacqueline led Evan down the carpeted hall, past framed photographs of company milestones, ribbon cuttings, charity galas, industry awards, images that spoke of triumph and precision. Evan walked a half-step behind her, his gaze lowered, as though afraid of leaving footprints on a world that gleamed too brightly for someone who had spent nights under open sky. She paused outside a door-marked wellness room. Most employees used it for meditation or mental health breaks, a sanctuary designed with soft chairs and warm lamps. Jacqueline keyed in a code, and the door unlocked with a quiet click. Inside, the room glowed with muted amber light. A plush sofa ran along one wall, blankets folded neatly at the end. A small water dispenser hummed in the corner. The air smelled faintly of lavender, a deliberate choice made during the company's wellness overhaul last year. She had approved every detail, colors, textures, even the brand of tea. But until now, she had never actually stepped inside. Evan hesitated at the threshold. "Ma'am, this is for your employees. I don't want anyone thinking." "They'll think what I tell them to think," she interrupted gently. "Sit. Rest. This space is safe." Safe. The word seemed to settle into him like warmth after cold exposure. He lowered himself onto the sofa slowly, as if afraid it might vanish beneath him. His hands fidgeted with the strap of his backpack until Jacqueline quietly said, "You can put it down. No one will take it." He set it beside him, though not entirely out of reach. "You're shaking," she noted. "It's just the cold, ma'am. I'll be fine in a minute." But she saw it wasn't the cold. It was the adrenaline crash, the body recognizing it was temporarily out of danger and trembling with the sudden flood of release. She recognized that look. She had seen it once before, years ago, on a man she'd known better than anyone. "Evan," she said softly, "I'm going to step outside for a moment. I'll have someone bring you clean clothes, a warm jacket, and some toiletries. You can shower in the private restroom down the hall." He stiffened. "I don't want to be a burden." "You're not," she said, more firmly this time. "You're a guest." He glanced up at her, and the mixture of disbelief and gratitude in his eyes made her chest tighten unexpectedly. When she left the room, she closed the door with a gentle click. The hallway beyond was already buzzing, assistants carrying tablets, managers reviewing schedules, interns clutching coffees like lifelines. Several pairs of eyes fell on her. Whispers. Questions she didn't address. Her assistant, Nora, approached with cautious urgency. "Jacqueline, the board is upset. They've already rescheduled twice." "They can reschedule a third time," Jacqueline said. Nora blinked. "May I ask what's happening?" "Not right now." Her tone softened. "Please bring a set of men's clothes from the staff donation closet. Medium build. And send a message to facilities. I want the private shower on this floor stocked with towels and personal care items." Nora hesitated. "Is this for the man from the lobby?" "Yes." There was a beat of silence, shock held carefully behind professionalism. "Of course, Ms. Hale. Right away." As Nora hurried off, Jacqueline stepped toward her office but didn't enter. Instead, she stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows, staring down at the city swirling awake below. Her reflection hovered faintly in the glass, immaculate suit, hair in a perfect chignon, expression polished into calm authority. But beneath that was something else. Someone else. Years crumbled at the edges of her thoughts until a memory pushed forward in sharp relief. Her brother Marcus, wide smile, crooked salute, the pride in his eyes the day he boarded the bus for basic training. She had been 23. He had been 19. Too young to see the world the way it would show itself to him. He never came home the same. She could still remember the night he showed up on her doorstep, hands shaking, uniform rumpled, eyes hollowed out by things he couldn't name. He had refused to come inside at first. Said he didn't want to disrupt her life. Said he didn't want to be a burden. He had slept on her couch for 2 weeks, afraid to close his eyes, afraid to talk, afraid to ask for help. And she, working 2 jobs, trying to keep afloat, hadn't known how to save him. Years later, after losing him to a slow-moving darkness she'd never been able to outrun, she had buried that guilt beneath success. Buried it beneath long hours, sharp decisions, and the armor of a woman who would never again feel helpless. Until this morning. A knock pulled her from the memory. Nora returned with clothes, a jacket, and a small tote bag of toiletries. "Everything you asked for, Ms. Hale." "Thank you." "Leave them outside the wellness room," Jacqueline said. But before Nora left, she hesitated again. "Jacqueline, people are talking. Some staff are asking if he's dangerous." The question stirred something cold in Jacqueline's chest. "He's a veteran," she said quietly. "He's tired. And he's cold. That's all anyone needs to know." Nora nodded, chastened, and left. Jacqueline took a slow breath, steadying herself before returning to the wellness room. She knocked lightly, then opened the door. Evan sat hunched forward, elbows on his knees, hands clasped together. His eyes were closed, but not in rest. In concentration. As though he were bracing for impact. "There are clothes waiting for you outside," she said softly. "Clean, warm ones. The shower is just down the hall to your right." He opened his eyes and looked up with startled gratitude. "Ma'am, thank you." She nodded toward the door. "Take your time." When he stepped outside, he moved with the tentative caution of someone walking on unfamiliar ground. She watched him disappear down the hall, the bundle of clothes tucked under his arm like something precious. Only when he was out of sight did she allow the quiet to settle again, cool, deep, introspective. Despite the noise outside this suite, a stillness lived inside her. A stillness that reminded her of hospital nights spent holding her brother's hand, whispering to him that he wasn't alone. That she would help him get better. That everything would be okay. Promises she had meant. Promises she had failed to keep. Minutes later, the muffled sound of running water echoed down the hall. Jacqueline sat on the sofa and waited, hands folded loosely in her lap. The scent of lavender softened the edges of the room. Time slowed. When Evan finally returned, his hair damp, his skin clearer, his posture slightly less wound-tight, he looked younger. Not less burdened, but less cloaked in the grime of the streets. He wore the donated clothes, simple, clean, slightly loose, and a quiet uncertainty in his expression. "Feel better?" she asked. He nodded, though a flicker of tension still traced his shoulders. "I didn't realize how long it's been since a real shower." "You're safe here," she reminded him. "At least for today." He sat back on the sofa, fingers threading together again. "I don't understand why you're helping me." She looked at him for a long moment, the truth pressing against her ribs. "Because once," she whispered, "someone I loved needed help. And I didn't see it in time." His eyes softened, confusion mingled with compassion. But before he could ask more, a sudden commotion erupted outside, the sharp, clipped urgency of raised voices near the elevators. Jacqueline and Evan both turned toward the door. Something was happening. And whatever it was coming straight for them. The voices outside rose from murmurs to sharp cuts in the hallway air, footsteps, hurried, overlapping, then the unmistakable edge of someone arguing. Jacqueline stood immediately. Evan stiffened beside her, instinct rippling through him like a silent command. The wellness room, moments ago a sanctuary of warm light and lavender calm, felt suddenly too small, too exposed. Then came a knock, urgent, rapid. "Jacqueline!" Nora's voice strained through the door. "You need to come out here." Jacqueline exchanged a glance with Evan before opening the door. Nora stood in the hall, her face pale, her tablet clutched tightly to her chest. Behind her, two men in security jackets lingered near the elevators, their posture alert, tense. "What's going on?" Jacqueline asked. Nora swallowed hard. Someone downstairs recognized him. Her gaze shifted subtly toward Evan. Evan's body went still, so still he seemed carved from stone. "Recognized me how?" he asked, voice low. Nora hesitated, then stepped back to allow another man forward, a younger security guard, cheeks flushed from the speed of his ascent. He held a small phone in his hand, screen lit with an image Jacqueline could not yet see. "Ma'am," he said, breath uneven, "one of the lobby visitors. She thought he looked familiar. She sent this." He turned the screen to Jacqueline. The image showed a news headline from 6 months ago, a blurry security camera still of a man standing in a convenience store, hands raised, the timestamp from a late hour. The headline read, Veteran sought for questioning in late-night altercation. Jacqueline felt the ground shift. Nora whispered, "It's him, isn't it?" The man in the photo had the same profile as Evan, the same strong jaw, the same haunted eyes. But the image was grainy, distorted, captured by a cheap security camera in harsh fluorescent light. There was no certainty in it, only assumption, fear, and the ease with which people stitched together conclusions. Evan didn't look at the phone. He didn't need to. The moment he saw the tension in the hallway, he seemed to shrink inward, not in weakness, but in grim acceptance, as though he had been waiting for this moment to find him no matter where he hid. Jacqueline turned to him. "Is that you?" His breath hitched. He didn't answer for a moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was quiet, steady, unbearably tired. "Yes." Nora drew a sharp breath. The security officers exchanged glances. But Jacqueline did not move. "What happened?" Evan looked at the floor. "It wasn't what they said. I wasn't running. I wasn't hiding from anything. I gave a statement. I cooperated. They cleared me, but—" He shook his head. "It doesn't matter. Once your face is on the news, people don't forget. Employers don't forget. Landlords don't forget." The edges of him seemed to fracture, shame pulling at one side, indignation pulling at the other, truth somewhere caught between. He rubbed the scar at his temple, a gesture she'd begun to recognize as a grounding mechanism. "It was a fight," he said softly. "A guy in the store got aggressive with the cashier. She was a kid, 17 maybe. He hit her. I stepped in. Things got messy. Someone called the police, and when they arrived, everyone was shouting. Cameras caught everything except the part where the girl was crying behind the counter." He swallowed. Charges were dropped. But it didn't matter. After that, every interview I went to, they'd ask. Or they'd Google me before I even walked in the door. One of the security officers stepped forward. "Ms. Hale, protocols state that if a person of interest—" "He is not a person of interest," Jacqueline snapped, ice in her voice. "He is a guest. Ma'am, with respect, this could be a liability." "A liability," she repeated, her voice sharp enough to cut. "You think helping a man warm up and eat breakfast is a liability?" The guard straightened. "The board might see it that way." Her jaw tightened. The board. The staff. The whispers already threading their way through the building. She could feel the weight of it gathering like a storm behind her. Evan shifted, his voice barely above a breath. "It's okay, ma'am. I should go." "No," she said immediately. He shook his head. "I don't want to cause trouble for you." He took a small step back, the instinct of someone used to leaving before being asked to. Used to disappearing before becoming anyone's burden. That struck something deep in her chest, a sharp echo of her brother standing in her apartment doorway years ago, shoulders trembling, saying, "I'll go, Jackie. I don't want to mess up your life." And she had let him leave. "Not again." "Everyone out," Jacqueline said. Nora blinked. "Jacqueline." "Out." Her tone left no room for interpretation. The guards retreated. Nora followed, still pale, still confused, but trusting enough to step back. The door closed, leaving only Jacqueline and Evan in the quiet hallway. "You're not leaving," she said softly. He closed his eyes, as though bracing for the weight of the world. "Jacqueline, this—" "No," she repeated. "You are not leaving this building because someone sent a blurry picture of a bad night and a headline stripped of context." His breath wavered. "People think what they want. Then I'll tell them what they need to know." He glanced up at her, disbelief flickering in his eyes. "Why are you doing this?" She stepped closer, lowering her voice. "Because someone once tried to disappear from my life when he needed help most. And I didn't stop him." Her throat tightened. "I won't make that mistake again." Evan stared at her, truly stared, as though seeing something inside her he hadn't noticed before. Something raw. Something human. His posture softened, the tension in his shoulders loosening just enough to let breath through. "What do you want me to do?" he whispered. "Come with me." They walked down the hallway together, past the wellness room, past the executive offices, to the corner suite where the company held its internal briefings. Jacqueline pushed open the doors. Inside, several department heads sat waiting, mid-discussion, their voices halting as she entered with Evan at her side. Eyes widened. Whispers caught in throats. The room froze. Jacqueline took her place at the head of the table. "This is Private First Class Evan Morrow," she said, voice even, unwavering. "He is a veteran. He is a guest in this building. And before any rumors begin spreading, I want everyone to hear the truth directly." A ripple of shock moved across the room. Evan shifted beside her, clearly uncomfortable, but she met his gaze briefly, offering silent assurance. He drew a slow breath. Jacqueline continued. "This morning, we found him outside. He was cold. He was hungry. He was alone. And we helped him, because that is what any decent human being would do." Her words fell like a gavel. Clear. Final. A manager cleared his throat. "Ms. Hale, the security team mentioned." "A headline?" she asked. "A blurry photo?" She leaned forward. "Before you pass judgment on someone who served this country, you should hear what actually happened." The room fell completely silent. Evan's eyes dropped, but he spoke, quiet, raw, and honest. He told them about the convenience store, the girl behind the counter, the man who hit her, the police who arrived in chaos. The charges dropped, but the digital shadow that clung to him like a stain. When he finished, no one spoke. Not even the skeptics. Jacqueline let the moment settle, heavy and real. Then she said, "He is staying here today. Under my care. Anyone who has a problem with that can speak to me privately." The message was unmistakable. The meeting ended early. Managers filed out, their expressions mixed, surprise, discomfort, admiration, but none challenged her. When the room finally emptied, Evan whispered, "You didn't have to do that." "Yes," she said softly, "I did." He looked at her, truly looked, and for the first time since she'd found him on the steps that morning, something warm flickered in his eyes. It wasn't relief. Not quite. But it was the first fragile spark of trust. And neither of them knew it yet, but this moment, this stand, this truth, this quiet defiance, was the spark that would ignite everything that came next. The afternoon settled into the building like a held breath, tense, watchful, uncertain. Word had spread faster than Jacqueline expected. By the time she and Evan stepped out of the briefing room, there was a shift in the air, an awareness that something unusual, something human, had pierced the company's sterile routines. Assistants glanced up from their screens. Managers paused mid-sentence. Even the security guards stood straighter, unsure how to hold themselves in the new gravity of the day. Jacqueline felt it all pressing toward her, but she moved with steady purpose. "There's one more place I want to show you," she said to Evan. He followed her through the executive floor, quiet but no longer shrinking. Something in him had changed, subtle but unmistakable. The shame that had clung to him like a second skin seemed thinner now, worn at the edges by truth spoken aloud and a room that had listened without turning away. They stopped at a door she rarely opened. No signage. No decoration. Just a small polished plaque. Quiet room. She unlocked it, and the hinges whispered as the door swung inward. Inside, soft white light filtered through a circular skylight. The room was nearly empty except for a low wooden bench and a single framed photograph on the far wall. Her brother, Marcus, in uniform, smiling with a brightness that felt like sunlight captured in glass. Evan froze. Jacqueline stepped inside, her heels silent on the woven mat. "I don't bring people here," she said. "Not staff. Not colleagues. No one." He stood at the threshold, unsure whether he was allowed to cross it. "It's all right," she murmured. "Come in." He did, slowly, reverently, as though stepping into a place sacred enough to demand quiet. "I made this room the year after Marcus died," she said, her voice steady but threaded with softness. "Not as a memorial for the company, but as a reminder to myself. A place where I couldn't hide behind work." Evan looked at the photograph, his breath catching faintly. "He looks proud." "He was," she whispered. "He wanted to be a hero." Silence drifted through the room, gentle, unhurried. "What happened to him?" Evan asked, not to pry, but because the weight in her voice asked for witness. Jacqueline inhaled slowly. "He came home from his last deployment different. Not broken, just carrying things he didn't know how to put down. She folded her arms loosely, gaze softening. He didn't talk about it. He didn't want to worry me. And I was so caught up in trying to build a career that I thought giving him space was helping. Her voice thinned. It wasn't. The hush deepened. He disappeared for a while, she continued. Stayed with friends, drifted, tried to find footing. I told myself he needed independence. I told myself he'd reach out when he was ready. She exhaled. By the time he did, it was too late. Evan's jaw tightened, not with judgment, but with recognition. A resonance of shared ghosts. I couldn't save him, she said. But I can save others. Not in grand gestures. Not in sweeping solutions. But in the smallest of moments. Moments where someone decides to stop. To notice. To care. Her gaze found his. This morning was one of those moments. Evan swallowed, his eyes bright with unspoken emotion. You didn't know me. I didn't need to, she said. He looked at the floor, voice thick. I didn't think people like you saw people like me. She stepped closer. Evan, I didn't see Marcus when he needed me. I won't make that mistake again. Not with you. Not with anyone who carries wounds the world doesn't see. A tremor crossed his shoulders. Not fear. Release. He sank slowly onto the wooden bench, elbows resting on his knees. Jacqueline sat beside him, leaving just enough space so he didn't feel crowded. Sunlight from the skylight haloed the room, warming the edges of their silence. After a long moment, he spoke. I didn't know where I was going last night, he said. I just walked. I told myself I'd rest anywhere there weren't crowds, noise, danger. I never expected this. Any of this. You deserved rest, Jacqueline said gently. And dignity. And warmth. A faint, incredulous smile touched his lips. It's been a long time since anyone thought I deserved anything. She didn't smile back. Her voice was too soft for that. Then let this be the start. Another silence. Peaceful this time. When Evan finally lifted his head, there was something steadier in his expression. Fragile but real. What happens now? Jacqueline stood slowly. Now, she said, we talk about the future. They left the quiet room and returned to her office, an expansive suite lined with books on leadership, philanthropy, economics, and a single shelf containing military history and veteran support literature. Evan sat across from her, posture straight not out of tension but respect. She opened her laptop. My company runs a workforce reintegration program, she said. Internships, training, long-term employment pathways. Mostly young professionals, but it was originally designed for veterans. We've drifted from that mission over the years. He blinked, cautious. Why are you telling me this? Because I'm reinstating that mission, she said. And I'm offering you a place in the program. Employment. Stability. A team that understands you're rebuilding. Not a handout. A beginning. Shock flickered across his face. I don't know if I'm ready. No one ever feels ready, she said. Ready is a myth. Starting anyway is what matters. Emotion pulled at his features, hope tangled with fear. Let me earn it, he whispered. You already have, she replied. He looked down at his hands, steady, warm, no longer trembling. What would your brother think? He asked quietly. Jacqueline's throat tightened. He'd tell me I got it right this time. A soft knock broke the moment. Nora leaned in, carefully, respectfully. Ms. Hale, the board would like to reconvene whenever you're ready. Jacqueline nodded. Tell them I'll be in shortly. When the door closed, she turned back to Evan. If you accept the program, we'll begin with housing assistance, counseling support, and job placement. You won't be alone in any of it. His breath shuddered, not from fear, but from the staggering weight of relief. Jacqueline, he said softly, I don't know how to thank you. You don't have to, she said. Just keep going. He nodded, a slow, deliberate gesture filled with meaning. They stood. For the first time, Evan extended his hand, not stiffly, not formally, but with quiet gratitude. She took it. A small handshake. A large promise. As she walked him toward the exit of the executive suite, the staff who had watched with suspicion earlier now stepped aside with something gentler in their eyes. Not judgment. Not awe. Understanding. Evan paused at the elevator. "You changed my life today." Jacqueline met his gaze. "You changed mine first." The elevator doors slid open. As he stepped inside, sunlight caught the edges of his face, illuminating the man beneath the exhaustion, the soldier, the survivor, the story still unfolding. Before the doors closed, he whispered, "Thank you for seeing me." Jacqueline watched the elevator descend, the numbers blinking softly. She exhaled, a deep, cleansing breath that felt like the closing of one chapter and the beginning of another. Her reflection glimmered faintly in the polished glass wall beside her. Not the flawless CEO. Not the woman armored by success. Someone softer. Stronger. Someone who remembered how to choose humanity over habit. She turned toward the boardroom, heels clicking with renewed purpose. Today's decisions would ripple far beyond corporate agendas. As she walked, a thought brushed her mind, gentle, quiet, full of her brother's memory. Sometimes the smallest act of noticing becomes the moment everything changes. And for the first time in years, Jacqueline Hale stepped forward not just as a leader, but as someone who had finally learned how to see.